Hey y'all, this is Trans Cookout. It's like swinging on the porch, shucking corn, and shooting the breeze, but make it a podcast. Trans Cookout is a monthly listening session hosted by me, Holiday Simmons, the Director of Healing and Resilience at the Campaign for Southern Equality. Each month, I get to be in conversation with wellness practitioners and trans leaders as we discuss topics relevant to our communities, including strategies for healing and tools for liberation. And here is our latest episode. Hey, y'all, welcome back to the third episode of Trans Cookout, where all year we'll be talking to wellness practitioners and cultural workers working to make queer and trans communities in the South a little bit better, a little bit brighter. And I'm so honored and delighted to be in conversation this week, this month, this episode with David H. Parker. David H. Parker is a director, a producer, a writer, a performer, a cultural worker. They are the co-artistic director of the award-winning Birmingham Black Repertory Theater Collective, BBRTC. BBRTC is a Black queer youth-led grassroots nonprofit organization building power and capacity for marginalized artists while catalyzing a culture of Black theater in the South. One of BBRTC's core strategy is advocacy for racial justice, gender justice, and disability justice in the arts. I just want to highlight something I saw on y'all's website, which is theater is my Black job. I love that. I'm going to pause this intro now because I actually want to just give you much more time than me reading this incredibly long bio, not only just with your role as co-artistic director of BBRTC, but also you have so many other artistic projects of your own. You have wrote, produced, and worked with all types of Emmy and Tony Award-winning performers. And I feel like you are destined for an Emmy and a Tony Award if you haven't got one already. So without further ado, I humbly would love to introduce David H. Parker. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Holiday. Thank you so much for the intro. My God, I love a little, bounce around, sort of pull a little bit from everywhere because I feel like hands are in a lot of different pots. So I really appreciate that uplift. That
Mhm.
was beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. And besides a little bit of what I read, um, I I read a little bit and I hinted that there's much more. So in addition to what I just read, can you just tell me a little bit about yourself? Where you're from? Where'd you grow up? Where do you live now? And how did you come to do some of the things that you're up to?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people would hear a little bit about my story, my background, my upbringing, and I've gotten a lot of, oh, so you're a military brat, you're a military kid, but that's actually pretty far from where it came from. I guess if you think about it, my dad, I'm biracial. My mom is white, my dad is Black, or was. He passed away in 2019, but he was in Desert Eagle, Desert Storm. So the military actually does run in my family, but my mom just had a lot of just brought in a lot of stepdads for me when my dad wasn't in the picture. And that meant that we lived all over the South, from places like Dallas, Texas, to South Texas, South Florida, Baton Rouge, Louisiana for a second there. But Birmingham, honestly, always was the place that was consistently home, or it was the vacation from home once we lived in Texas. So it's kind of, all around the South, really consider my nest egg. And I landed with Birmingham Black Repertory Theater Collective because it's a space that really lets me still give back to my communities that I grew up saying, this is where I'm meant to be, this is where I'm from, even if I couldn't always be there, and still get to pursue the commercial life, the sort of commercial success that then feeds back into those communities. Because I think that's the only way to really do what we do, is to not get lost in the glamour of industry, to not be misled or confused or destabilized by the glamour too. And yeah, because I think it's easy when we start to say, "Oh, I produce this thing. I work with award-winning actors," to get like that. What that means is just proximity to what those opportunities can ultimately uplift and platform for people that may never get actual access to them, right? There's this Femi, and you know what? We'll come back around to it, and I'm going to get you the last name, Femi Oletifuyo, who wrote a book called Elite Class, I believe. Somebody that's listening to this is going to tap in and know exactly the title of that. But there's this idea that the
Elite Capture.
elite capture, yes, you know about
Yes,
it. Yes.
I have. Yes, I
Okay,
read that.
come on. I knew you would know your way in. And in that book, he really talks about this idea that our access and the rooms that we're in they're not our salvation. And I really fully believe that. And Devin Tyreek Franklin, I know you're listening to this, they know who they are. Um, they're the one that put me on to Femi's book. And yeah, I just have to remind myself of that any time in any rooms that I'm in because the culture organizing space is over here on the right and all of that is over there on the left. And somehow I'm balancing this space in the middle, and I couldn't be more grateful to really figure it out and make it happen for my people. I just walk with so many privileges that I have to give those things back. Like beauty privilege, light skin privilege, the colorism of it all. Like I'm fully aware, and I'm like, how do I divest and reinvest? Right.
Yes, yes, indeed. Yes, I appreciate you naming that.
Mm,
I always feel a sense of uh, I think the first sensation is relief, and then the next one is sort of like touching into possibility when people are just upfront about their privileges
mm.
right off the bat. Love an application from a white person that tells me they're white. Like I mean, it's the first step. It's at least the first step. Now we're
That's
going to
it.
talk about all right, what you're doing
Exactly.
with those privileges. But yeah, so I appreciate that.
Mm,
I want to draw a map a little bit about you shared some of the upbringing, being a child of someone in the services and moving around a lot. How did you, and you currently reside? I mean, I know you have a foot in Birmingham because you're the co-artistic director of BBRTC, but you currently reside in Brooklyn, New York, correct?
yes.
So, tell me a little bit about the path from like post high school to current. I think you said you did a program in LA. What was that?
Yeah. So I went from it's so the way I describe it is going putting the pieces back, looking backwards is so I think that this comes up a lot in when I write and I apply for anything. There's this idea of destabilization because the kids that I would grow up with, and this isn't necessarily the question you asked, but I'll pull it right back into that point. But the kids that you grew up with, and I'll use I statements for this, but kids that I grew up with and went to school with or were homeschooled with, because I actually was homeschooled for more of my childhood than I wasn't. I was homeschooled from probably the ages of, if I had to guess, 7, 8-ish to like 11. And then I was in school part of the time. And then I was in school finally full time in fourth, fifth grade. And during that time, you really grow up with kids who know the same from the moment they're born to the moment that they get out of high school and I maybe go to college, maybe inherit wealth or inherit a family business. They inherit a community, they inherit social circles, they inherit cultural capital, they inherit social capital, and they have a safety net underneath them at all times because of those built-in inheritances. And I'm not even necessarily just talking about people that grow up with wealth uh, or monetary wealth, financial wealth, because that can show up in so many different ways. And so when I came out of those homeschooled situations where, I'm with other people who are in very deliberately, my mom would actually call it unschooling programs because because homeschooling can really attach itself to an educational based curriculum, right? Like a regular school. Unschooling really is like a socialization program because in homeschooling you usually don't get friends, right? Built into not being in school, and school really comes with a socialization aspect that I don't know that we talk about enough because sports, extracurriculars, things like that actually really do give you immediate and direct access to a social circle. And in that unschooling, yeah, I just didn't have that. And so coming into middle school and then high school, which was really funny because I was homeschooled mostly in Texas, and then I came to high school in Alabama. like midway. I started high school in Texas. Sorry, I literally going back and putting all of this together is really funny. But I started high school in Texas and then finished it in Alabama in a little town called Tuscaloosa. And I say little, but it's got, one of the biggest
Roll
schools.
Tide.
Roll
Yeah.
Tide, yeah, exactly. And somebody out there's on the other side of this going War Eagle because they don't believe in they don't believe in the Tide. Um, but coming to Tuscaloosa, being ripped right out of that, whatever we had, the seeds that we had planted in Texas, midway through my high school experience, being just dropped in a new school, literally halfway through, maybe my junior year, I think it was, and then it sort of feels like a free fall, like floating in space a little bit too, just detached, until community really starts to come back. But then by that time, boom, graduation from high school, and then actually going to college. And I did go to, a university in Birmingham, which is a sort of Blue Islands. Like it feels, I mean, it's a very democratic. It leaned toward,
University of Alabama, Birmingham,
that's it,
UAB.
that's it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and the city really leans toward even being a sanctuary city, even though you can't necessarily be a sanctuary city. And that really allowed me to tap in for the first time because I was in a stable place for 4 years, committed to this, this concept to a thing, committed to a thing. It doesn't matter what it was, but committed to a thing, committed to people, committed to a process, committed to a financial situation, at a place where I had 3 or 4 jobs at one time. And that was just that was a contrast to my childhood where that sameness and that consistency just didn't exist. And so I really do feel like that was the moment where I really started to realize what community can look like and what I needed out of it. And BBRTC popped up, after I was finishing school. And it, even when I went to graduate school in LA, it felt like I could still be part of BBRTC because they had these things called associate artistic partners at the time, which is basically we're made up of a contingency of associate and key partners. And so key partners were in the city, associate partners were outside of the city, right? And so we could learn everything that was going on back home. We could donate our time in virtual meetings around the time that Zoom was blowing up for the necessity of the pandemic, of course. And yeah, we just stayed rooted with each other. And all that, what I brought with me in that churn of inconsistency as, growing up and then suddenly getting a hang of what it means to actually have a consistent sort of social and cultural connection to where I was living. And then still being able to be 2,500 miles away from it, but still very tapped in. I don't know. There's just something beautiful about
Yeah.
that. We don't all get it.
Yeah, I hear you. I do feel like there's something about a lot of places in the South that once you have sort of a community or a base or a footprint there in some way that you can stay there even if you go anywhere else in the world. You
Mm,
can always come back and you can always stay connected. I really do appreciate that. I think I know what you're saying. And thank you for that storytelling around the stability that you got in Birmingham for the first time compared to a life of sort of jumping around,
mm.
depending on the military post, and then post high school, or stayed in Birmingham for undergrad and then left to LA for grad school, but was able to stay connected. Now you're in New York post grad school and you're still connected to Birmingham. So
That's right.
I'm seeing the path now. Thank you for laying that out. Um, I cannot say enough about how intrigued I am to be learning about BBRTC, as someone who grew up in the 80s in St. Louis. I had a lot of energy as a kid, and my mom was like, "Ooh, chow, let's put this on." I mean, we got some of it on the soccer field. Now let's put the rest of it on a stage. And so shout out to Ron Himes and the St. Louis Black Repertory Theater
Yeah.
Company, who helped me, channel some of this energy as a young person. And I bring that. I mean, I want to shout out some of my artistic roots, but also I I have because of I have a sense of like what a beautiful functional black repertory theater company can look like in terms of the shows that they bring, the quality of the productions, the quality of of the building and everything, right? But I've yet to ever see one that was so specifically centering queerness and people with disabilities and disability justice, and that's exactly what I see in Birmingham Black Repertory Theater Company. So before we get to talking about that space and that programming, how did you personally come to some of the social justice work that is infused with with so many of your artistic work that I've seen online?
Wow, I really appreciate the anecdote, right? Back to from where you grew up in St. Louis and this connection to really needing a place to get some of that out. I think that is probably relatable to any of us that are in the arts or even resonate with the arts or see ourselves or don't see ourselves in the art, which actually was the case with BBRTC to sort of, give a little bit of that story, and then I'll come back to around to my own involvement in it. 20 end of 2018 comes, beginning of 2019 roughly, and there is a coalition of community theaters in Birmingham that are either exclusive of, directly harmful toward, or I'll just leave it at that, toward Blackness, Black theater practitioners, actors, just artists in general in the city. BBRTC doesn't exist yet. There's not a deep connection between even UAB's theater department and any sort of other programming in the city. The biggest regional theater or really the only regional theater that I can think of actually in Alabama, RMTC, is not necessarily branching out or trying to do any sort of DEI anything, right? This is sort of this is pre-pandemic, this is pre-2020, this is pre sort of the realization of the types of anti anti-blackness, anti-racist, like all of that educational work that needs to be done by PWIs, by predominantly white institutions. And so there's a person named Carlton V. Bell, who the second, who is feeling scrappy and like they're not seeing themselves in anything and they're not getting hired for certain things, or they are and they're getting harmed by the people that hire them. And they went, I want to put on a production of Choir Boy by Terrell Alvin McCraney, because it had just sort of swept, the New York theater scene. It had really done its thing in the Northeast, and it had not had a Southeastern premiere yet. And they got the rights, they put it up. It was, I go back to the word scrappy, but it was this thing that they sort of pulled together, but then it was lauded because it was in Alabama Magazine. It was Alabama.com magazine. Carlton, who goes by CJ now, was like the entertainer of the year that year, and the production won all these regional Broadway World awards, which community puts in their votes. Community vocalizes how they feel about particular shows, especially on in categories like that. So it's not like it was just a panel of people that saw it and decided to give it these things. People really responded and uplifted the power of the piece and the moment and the inherent blackness. And like you said before, the inherent queerness that's attached to that show. It's not Raisin in the Sun that everybody knows by Lorraine Hansberry, right? Like it's not Fences. It's not this heterosexual relationship or this family dynamic that we recognize, but it's Black. It's Black. It's queer. It's gay. I mean, it was like specifically gay. um, and so there's a lot of power in that specificity because it made the thing universal, right? And so they were able to sell out multiple shows for that reason. And Birmingham Black Theater Company was born from Birmingham Black Repertory Theater Company was born from that. And then over the years, it has become a collective because of the nature of our work. The intention is not to produce a show, sell out tickets, put butts in seats, and turn it over. Like that's not necessarily what we do.
Ah, thank you. I was gonna say, what's the bit about the collective? I noticed it's not company, it's collective. So you're getting into that thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really where that's not the beginning of my social justice work, but I think that my awareness for where my power is most specifically, or even more than specifically, but intentionally directed, and where it can be like where my what am I trying to say? Where my labor sort of multiplies itself is in this space, because the collectivism of it all is really a testament to this fact that it's a cultural organizing term, polyrhythmic praxis, which is something that they teach at Highlander in Newmarket, Tennessee. Shout out to Jonathan and Janae Taylor over there, and everybody that I'm not naming, like Octavia.
Whoop,
And
whoop.
and polyrhythmic praxis is this idea that we can all do our different things that we are amazing at, going in different directions at all different times, serving the same purpose. So it's not trying to get us all to do the same thing at the same time because that'd be impossible. It would also exhaust us all, and we're not all good at the same thing. Like if I had to do if I had to be the person that CJ is and I had to do the lift in the type of way that CJ is, I could not do what I do because I would already have tapped out by now. I know I would have tapped out like 3 years ago, okay? And I think that how we and I was just talking to shout out to Johnny LeVay too because I was talking to him about how organizing can be a sustainable practice. And I think people are afraid of organizing or sort of a little, keep it at arm's length because we're not sure about how we see ourselves in it, except exhausted, poor, broke, hungry, right? But if we are doing a polyrhythmic practice, it means we're taking care of ourselves in this huge space filled with people, part of a collective, right? Like a handful of us that are all balanced in our various ways outside of like being with each other. So that's really where my emphasis is. I really love how we can wrap wellness into our practices as an org.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, I love that. I keep whatever the few times you said polyrhythmic practice, I keep picturing some of the Bruce Lee philosophies around people, culture, and movements. His "Be
Mm,
Like Water" philosophy.
mm,
Google it if you don't know. It's the Hong Kong uprisings a couple of years ago
mm.
that a lot of the black organizers in the U.S. modeled uh, various, Black Lives Matter movements after the Hong Kong uprisings
Oh wow.
because of this model where they were like, people were spreading out in different directions around the city, doing these protests, and then coming back together in a different area of the city. Just Google "Be Like Water" Bruce Lee philosophy. So it sounds very similarly aligned as tell me the term again that you learned from Highlander.
Polyrhythmic praxis. Hmm.
Polyrhythmic practice.
Hmm.
Love that. Love it. And I also do love a good polyrhythm.
That's right.
Um, it's just deep in my bones.
Oh, it is. No,
Um,
right. And that's also, we do that as an org too. We've shared that in other training sessions outside of, Highlander where they taught it to us. But this idea that we can all sing together in rounds to both begin and maybe even end meetings. We have 2 meetings a month as an org. Last year we met 4 times a month because we were in the middle of a leadership transition from co-foundership to the new artistic directors, myself and Jada Cato, who is a glad country star. So shout out, go stream her. And it's this idea that if we fellowship with each other in a non-gospel way, but in a much more spiritual, really specific, we can really awaken our voices, remind ourselves that we have really loud, powerful voices, both internal and external. And that's something that's more powerful than sometimes that's church for real for us.
yeah, I mean, that sounds like a powerful somatic practice.
Completely.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Um, let's talk about the impact that BBRTC and some of your other work has on queer and trans youth and BIPOC youth and youth of disabilities. How do specifically queer and trans youth access the programming and the space, and what is some of the impact that you've seen BBRTC or other projects that you're on have on queer and trans youth?
Yes, so in 2022, I love a story. Because in the profession of theater is an oral storytelling tradition rather. Um, I graduated with an acting degree, and so people would really clock me for not enunciating that just now. But it's a storytelling tradition. We come from also African tradition, griots, telling stories to preserve the culture is ultimately what that is, right? And so if we're telling stories through theater to preserve art and culture and to also talk about and expand and really blow up daily life, and we're also doing that in our African storytelling tradition, which as part of the diaspora in the US is really our honestly our obligation to do it to keep the lineages alive. I have to repeat stories. So in 2022, there was a student named Taylor. And listen, if I'm going to do nothing else, I'm going to put people on and shout them out. So I hope that's okay through this. And you can you can get rid of them if that doesn't help. But Taylor in 2022 saw I actually don't know what the program she necessarily saw was, but she was like, I want a theater curriculum that I like a black theater curriculum that I can take because we don't have that in our schools. And that is like not really a thing that high schools just have. And she may have been at the end of high school or the beginning of undergrad at that point. Either way, it's both. I mean, it applies to both. And, leadership at the time rolled with it and said, let's see what we can put together. And it was yet again, as always, is the very beginning of any sort of process or new program. It was really pilot this in the way that focuses on a couple of students and builds it out in a way that's intentional and thoughtful to the way that they benefit from it right now. And so, early college, late high school students really want the fundamentals of Black theater traditions, Afrocentric practices, right? And so it really blossomed from there over the course of the next year and a half, 2 years or so, to be inclusive of Sherelle D. Luquette's Black theater practices. And in very, very intentionally at the core of it is Freddie Hendricks' Black acting methods. Actually, it's the other way around. Sherelle D. Luquette's Black acting method is the whole book, and then Freddie Hendricks Freddie Hendricks method is at the core of it. And so, really, that just means that we're empowering their hyperego, their spirituality, and making them feel like they can just do it, right? That we can just equip them with the tools, give them prompts in a room with each other and say, create this thing, and they will, right? Because it's a devising practice, which means that they create with very little.
And I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to kind of make sure I understand exactly what the program is. Is it an after school program? Is it a summer program? How long is it? Yeah, what's the
It
scope?
actually
And
started as
yeah,
a summer program only, and through even last year, it was a summer program that, as with the grant funding system, the way that it works is really we say that we have a program and then apply for things around it. And then as people say yes, as people say no, we sort of are able to shape it based on how much of the budget is actually there. And so last year in 2023, it was just a summer program where and it's not limited to just actors too. We'll put student designers in, we'll put students TAs in, right? So they really get like not everybody will get the full 360 view of it, but we get students in every sort of lane. And that's included a leadership cohort too last year, which was separate from specifically the just the theater lab, but because we have an umbrella of the theater lab, and then there might be the actual component where we produce it. We might have the component where we develop it, where we go into the streets and interview people. Like last summer, interviewed business owners and sort of turned that research into dramaturgy, which just tells us how to tell the best version of the story.
interesting. And, and do the
Yeah,
young
actually,
people do
last year
those
was
interviews?
really exciting because it was
Nice.
six. We expanded last year like no one's belief. It was six undergraduate students specifically from one was from LA, three were from Alabama, one was from Kentucky, and then one was going to Morehouse in Georgia. And what they did was they spent some time on some Zooms together. Well, with us, we gave them like the whole curriculum. And then we spent some time, with them preparing questions and us really auditing. Like us as holders of the program, we really kind of audit what the students do, but ultimately let them really take charge in it. And then, set up these Zoom interviews with the local business owner. And they translated all of their notes and turned it into a pitch deck. And then that pitch deck turned into a light script offering, and then we shared some of the questions and some of the presentation with the community. It's supposed to be a holistic program where there's opportunity at every step
Nice.
for different people, or you can opt in and you can be part of the whole arc. Exactly. Yeah.
The whole thing. Yeah. So this is
This
so
is one
this
of the
is
theater
so this
labs.
is the
This is the
theater
summer
lab,
lab.
right? One of the theater labs, and so those are
Mhm.
college students from all over the country. And then the programming for local Birmingham high school students
So the thing is
is
what we do is we
after
always
school
try to
program.
have a Birmingham anchored part of the
Mhm.
process, right? So all six of those artists were able to tap in at any point that they
Uh-huh.
wanted to in any of the Zooms, doing research on Black theaters to talk to for a different project, unrelated to that one specifically, but they could talk to us about who in the area feels like the best people to focus on, and they could help us develop the questions. And then the people on the ground in Birmingham, which was about, like I said, three or four of the students, because the one of them hadn't gone to Atlanta yet, could actually, um, if they wanted to, this is actually not how it worked out, but they could go to the local businesses to do the interviews. It was just more accessible for the elderly folk to actually just meet on
Hmm.
Zoom. Uh, yeah, so there's always an on the ground component, because what happened was the actual presentation following the research and writing the script was done right in the community that we were doing the research on, right? So they take the info and they turn it into a piece. And really
Got it.
it's going to be a 2 year process because that wasn't the full script, but it
Yeah.
all started nationally for the intention of a local focus, and then really really honed in on that locality. And now this year we're branching out a little bit more to make sure we can write the full play, cast it, and then bring it and then narrow it right back in. So we're kind of constantly adapting to whatever the state the process is in. Yeah.
Understood. Yeah. And through these programs, do I definitely, of course, picture young people on stage at some point, but it sounds like they're also learning a variety of skills. Do they also learn how to do like lights and
Yeah,
sound and
so
set design
there
and things
is
like
definitely
that?
an emphasis on the pre-production and then the actual performance of it. It's actually landed that this last year we didn't have anybody assisting on, I'm reeling my brain right now, assisting on lights or the design, just based on the narrowed scope of the actual presentation. And the intention, though, is
Hmm.
yes, for sort of sound, scenic costumes, lights, to
Hmm.
have some sort of student association. And we had students that were interested based on our presentation last year. So we'll probably have them come on board as we go into the fall, really late summer, early fall here, and are looking at, because we just hired a playwright. Her name is Bettina Bird Giles. She is a Rhodes Scholar, and she basically holds the cultural knowledge of that entire district in Birmingham. It's the Birmingham Black Fourth Avenue business district. So it's 50, 60, 70 plus year old district with people that have been
Cool.
owning their
Yeah.
business for decades, facing a deep lack of support from the city. And Miss Bird Giles, Miss Bettina, is just, she's about to write the version of the story that we really, really, really need to see there. And as we put it up later this year, and maybe even going into next year, just depending on the timeline of it, yeah, the idea is that we have a fully stacked out creative team. So Black students are learning multiple different ways into the process rather than just, writing, producing, and acting. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Um, I have the perception that um, some performing arts and definitely some theater spaces, and most certainly if you get into screen things, whether that be TV or movies, that all of the above that I just named can be less accessible than one might think. So picture the working class Black queer child in the South. How could such a child, such a person coming of age, um, access some of these, all any of the above said resources? I specifically wanted to give that range of like um, arts and performing arts in general, and then theater specifically, and then even more specifically television. And I'm enumerating those in particular um, because the South is such a changing landscape for those arts, with Atlanta being considered Yollywood. I see constantly am seeing extra positions for extras, and I'm constantly meeting people who have moved to the South, including Alabama, also not just Atlanta, who do
Hmm.
various roles within theater or film. And I still and so I while I see it growing, and I think programs like BBRTC is a great example of the growing access. There's a similar youth program in Atlanta called what does YEA stand for?
No, no, I know what
Youth
you're talking about.
something Atlanta. I'm sorry, but yeah, it's amazing. I used to coach the Atlanta youth spoken word team back in the day, and a
Youth
lot of those
Ensemble of Atlanta.
young
That's where
folks
Freddie
went
Hendrix
through
works. Yes, I
YEA.
knew it was familiar. Yes, yes, yes.
You thought some of them. Excellent. Totally. Yeah. So like programs like this, I do feel like make my first statement about the
Yeah.
inaccessibility. It's totally changing the tide. But and yet and still, if we were to go to any housing project in Atlanta or Birmingham, we will find so many queer,
Yeah.
talented youth that maybe don't know about these programs and don't know what have you. So my question is, what are ways are that you've seen the most disenfranchised of us and our siblings
Mm,
access some of
mm.
this magic
What
in
a
these
beautiful way
spaces?
to.
How does it happen?
And that's right. That's right. No, that was a
And
really
I know
beautiful way to
MFA,
ask that.
yeah,
So, as a personal praxis, and I'm thinking back to a couple of things from last year, actually, I just assume when I'm in spaces, when I'm in conversations with people, when I'm in social circles, that there's some need already there that people can ask for. So to start with, I just assume where can I go ahead and already be in service to people? And we had, I'm just thinking about the sort of allies and spaces that we're in. We're connected to groups like the Flourish, Alabama, which is an inherently Black theater or Black artistic space, not necessarily a Black and queer space. But knowing that they've built a bridge to us that makes it so that anybody that's engaging with the work that they do could, if they see something about BBRTC that feels more alignment because they feel that they're queer or that there might be an allyship nature to the way that they work, then we want to make sure that that's there. And I feel like that's how we work and engage with a lot of different orgs in Alabama, in Birmingham, and outside of it. We even had, just to sort of lower the curtain a little bit, because everything that we do, including our budget, our programming, you could go click into it right now and see it because we're transparent in that way. And we try to build out an equitable payment process into all of that as well. So, in a grant meeting last year, somebody on the panel asked us, based on everything that we had shown them, and this is like a 5-year legacy at this point with BBRTC, so we had really honed it down to and narrowed it down to the specificities that you see even on this page or this website right now. And they asked, who is our program for? And we said, well, it's for, like, how do you, she the full question was, who is your program for? Like, how do you, is it, if it's only for Black, like, gay kids, like, how do you navigate that? And we said, well, it's actually not just for like Black gay kids, because we don't and can't really ask for people, like, we don't ask people explicitly on anything, are you gay, are you queer? We ask them to self-identify in a way that is considered, and not even on job applications. This is just to be a partner with us, which is a free process that just gets you a subscription to a newsletter and like updates from us, right? And priority job application on listings and things like that. But we said, our program is actually very self-selection, very opt-in, very I have to consent to continue to contribute, because you could let go of the reins at any point and you don't have to be part of anything we do anymore. We even have very light agreements in the way that we hold people in a non-contractual way, but it's truly an agreement. And we said, our program is for everybody that thinks that they should be here. Because if you don't even see yourself as queer, but you see yourself as cisgenders, and heterosexual, and you don't know nothing about this life, but you really feel like there's a place for you to contribute that, right? We have space and the ability for you to do that. And so we branched out to being in schools. The other program that I hadn't mentioned yet, it's the other part of the theater lab. We're in Jefferson County schools, right? Biggest district in Alabama, biggest county in Alabama. We're in three schools. So from September of 2024 through, wow, it's already starting to wrap up. Checking my watch on May 22nd, actually. And those three schools, we're not going in saying BBRTC is only for Black queer folks. We're not going into those classes because there are already existing theater classes that we're coming in and giving this guest curriculum in, right, week by week. And we're not saying only people that participate have to be out or have to be trans because, when you're in high school, all of those things they may be just seeds. And in some kids, they might have an idea of how visible they want to be, but you can't really, really narrow it down to that language and that mind space and that heart space yet. Like, not really. And it's hard to consent to things when you're a minor, too, right? So, and it may be impossible actually to consent as a minor. And so, I think in a roundabout way, that's how we do and engage with the people that we do because we truly offer a soft landing place for those identities, for our various intersections, our walks of life. For instance, I'm just truly pulling a few moments, but we had an elder actress who in 2019 on a production, the first one that I was on, she couldn't drive herself to rehearsals, and so we had to totally change our accommodations based on that, end rehearsals early or call her at a specific time so that we could work with other actors at certain points. That changed the entire trajectory of how we worked because she was a main character, right? And I think when you see the way
Yeah.
that people work like that, which is totally contrast to how other organizations and how other rehearsal rooms, how other artistic processes, educational processes
Absolutely.
work, when they feel like they're being catered to, when I feel like I'm being catered to, I go, oh, it's actually so possible to change how I think and how I move in other spaces. And so, in that sort of roundabout way, it's not even about us trying to like go appeal to
Absolutely.
houses and and orgs where there's like primarily Black queer trans people, but just making ourselves known so that people can approach us and know what we're holding and what we're capable of, because we'll turn it out for anybody, right? Even if we have no experience of how actually to take care of them,
Yes.
we're going to find the way. We're going to ask, we're not going to make any assumptions, and we're just going to know, or we're going to figure it out and not know.
Yeah. Yes, yes, yes. I love it. It
That's
sounds
right. Well, we
beautifully
kind of have to
unapologetic.
be,
I
if
love
you've
it.
been conditioned
Um,
to make yourself
I want to
smaller
ask
and not have
you,
needs and collapse yourself, right? And literally say, I will actually just be in pain for the purpose
that's
of
right.
this. But we're not asking anybody to ever do that.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. I love it. I love it. So David, I have just a couple more questions for you. I want to bring it back to your personal life. I'm curious. Woo, child. There's no less going on in this world right
Mm.
now than what our ancestors went through, and yet there's a shit ton going on. Pardon my expletive, but so how do you take how are you been taking care of yourself in these times? I'll say just 2025. How have you been taking care of yourself? What are some of your resilience strategies? And and perhaps even any inspiration that you've been
Mm.
finding. What have you been finding inspiration in?
I'm lucky to find myself in spaces where other folks in the spaces are consistently courageous about reinventing perspective. For instance, there is this one cultural organizer named Ember. That's not their full name, and I won't go into all of it. But their name is Ember. Shout out to Ember, who is part of a fund where we meet as a sort of leadership collective from the various organizations in the South, from North Carolina all the way. up, down the Bible Belt and the Black Belt. And Ember put in one of our first meetings, and so this is like January of this year, and so post November 5th, obviously, of last year, that was perfect timing. And really posed this idea that what we're working toward, and I believe they might have quoted somebody, not quoted somebody else, but sort of gave a framework from a book, but this was sort of how they translated that framework. And they live and work on a huge multi acre compound sort of situation that's like all Black, queer, trans, like GNC people. So it's kind of incredible sounding. And they said that they've been reinterpreting the intention of our liberation and the intention of our cultural organizing and gathering and activism as, instead of trying to create an entirely new world after burning this one down, taking it all down, that we're really trying to create a system of care worlds, like a large web network of smaller worlds within that feel like once you're in them, or while you're in them, or hopefully you never have to be out of them, that everything around it that is still stigmatized and destabilized and harmful and murderous in multiple senses of the word, they are exterior, right? They're last priority. They don't take precedence. And that these care worlds, we can really be intentional about how we're holding each other completely differently than we've been conditioned to do so. And even as, looking 100 years ahead, our generation, even when our generation is done and we've set things up for the next gens, that they're even more sort of protected in that way. And I don't even say protected in an infantilized way, but I really think about that as, again, thinking about BBRTC sort of soft landing. I think about how can we each be a soft landing for each other? How can we each be peace centered and care forward for the sake of it, and not because of a reason? Like we just do it, like it's the default. And so I in this last 4+ years, I've really been, especially with this playwright Danye R. Loves, just the way that they really forefront gentle softness with especially Black folks and especially Black queer folks, and just letting that be a thing that can exist naturally. I've really oriented myself to being that person too, as much as I can, because that's the only way I can sustain myself. And so when I self-talk, or which I will do in a mirror, right, or do that on walks, on like introspective moments outside. Usually in New York, it's a little bit hard to find, but usually when the sun is shining, and I definitely do miss that Alabama, that Texas sun, because it's so much more consistent. It also it just shines differently on you, on the skin, on the grass, than the Northeast sun does, or even in LA. That's different. That's some manufactured, that's some plastic sun over there on the West Coast. I don't know what is going on over there. But yeah, when I can just really be in tune with the grounds and with the air and the water and the sun, I really feel at my best and my most rested and activated too. Oh, I think we're having some connection. Am I still here? Am I still good? Okay, perfect. Okay, perfect.
Yep, I can
Yeah,
still hear
that's
you.
when I
Yep,
feel my
you're good.
most activated and my most in tune and grounded, because those things are also inherent to the body, right? The water, right? And the sunlight that we need literally it literally replicates our blood cells in a way that, and it gives us oxygen, and we're able to be more efficient, literal bodies, and continue to preserve and help ourselves survive, right? By connection to those things. So that's really when I feel the most in tune and well.
Yeah. Okay. So walks and nature and sun and water. It
Well,
sounds so
it
basic,
does
but it's
sound
actually quite
basic,
vital.
and I think
So I appreciate you sharing some of
in a,
those.
I think that we really downplay sometimes where the sort of cyberspace and like access to social media and proximity to the online space. Like I'm looking at two, three, just in this room, four, five, like seven devices just in this room right now, right? Or like when I'm surrounded by, in an office space, I'm just thinking about how easy it
Hmm.
is for us to for us to become horizontal in the way that we interact with just the nature of things. So yeah, really breaking out of that and freeing ourselves a little bit from
Absolutely.
from the prison of what we literally do to keep up with each other. It's an active choice, right? You have to choose your own peace and you have to choose your own wellness in that
Yep.
way.
No, absolutely. Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think we all probably benefit from that, but it's the intent benefit from everything you're talking about, like the sun, literally, and water and nature walks. But the intentionality of it is another flex. And I really appreciate that. Yeah, I am on somebody's trail at least 5 times a week with my
Yes,
dog, and it is my sanctuary. It is so. Uh, I don't have to pay nobody. I
exactly.
don't have to be
Yeah,
a
that's
member.
something that
Just
isn't
go in the
commodified,
forest.
which is
Yeah.
so rare
Um, Thank you
when
for
we
that.
don't have to pay for those things. And, I mean, until the day that we do, we might as well meet them
Hmm.
while it's free. And I really do think that that's a way to be anti-capitalist, and that is
That's
a
right.
way to be in the same way that Dr. Trisha Hersey says that, in the Nat ministry, that rest is resistance because Black bodies, POC bodies, queer bodies are literally commodified in that way, and we
Hmm.
don't even realize what's happening. We literally don't even notice what is
Yeah.
happening when we're crunching over and getting hunches because we're leaning over these computers for 10 plus hours a day. The resistance is to
Hmm.
straighten up. The resistance is to stand and get that flexion and that oxygen
That's
literally
right.
moving through and continuing to, make it so that you can do it again and again and again. Yeah, it's so exhausting. And yet here we
That's
are.
right.
We still keep it
Hmm.
pushing. Yeah, that's right.
Show you're right. Show you're right. Yes. Um, we have a number of non-binary and trans youth in our network. And just wondering, as we close out, if you have any words of encouragement for any non-binary, queer, trans, two-spirit
Mm.
youth who may be listening.
This identity just doesn't look or feel like anybody else's. And that's really what I wish that I could have known 10 years ago. And that transness also is just such a wide, deep, vast black hole of discovery. And those discoveries really happen every day, sometimes minute by minute, hour by hour. And I also used to think that the sort of GNC non-binary trans identity really meant that everybody has to see me as the thing that I say and know that I am interiorly, excuse me, interiorly or even expressively, and appearance wise. But the day that I was able to really reckon with and let it sit deeply that everything that we do on the outside is a performance anyway, going back to theater, it always comes back to that. But even more so, right? Because every day is kind of theater. Um, but breaking from that, like, I don't need everybody to see and understand and believe it. They just I just need you to respect me. And even if you don't, you're giving me a lot of information about who I don't need to be around anymore. And I'm real quick to pivot too. If you show me that you don't understand and you're not seeking to understand, we can't have it both ways. You're not in the circle anymore. We're not working together. We're not building. We're not creating. We're not organizing. We're not moving together. And the days that I spend being so in tune with myself and push out the need for understanding on the outside, I'll just say those are my days that I'm most at peace. And there's obviously a lot of ugly in the middle because some of those days I lose that knowledge or I lose that wisdom. And I think it's actually okay to lose something and then come back to it because it's just natural because there's so much external messaging coming in at us, going back to the online part of it all, because we're perpetually on the internet. And and I say these things not as it's not easy at all to vacillate between these things. I'm just saying it is a thing that happens, and the more that it can be acknowledged, the sort of more prepped you can feel to move through it. And I feel like that's all I would have wanted to know 10 years ago.
Absolutely. Let me make sure I captured that. um, that there are multiple worlds can happen, multiple ways of being, and that it's okay to oscillate between those worlds and those ways of being. And you don't have to be siloed into one particular way, expression, etc. And um, that internal experience that's happening can be in flux. And so whatever the external expression of it may
Yeah, I
also
think
be
you
in
did.
flux.
I
Did I
mean,
capture
in the
some of
South,
that?
sometimes I present differently. I perform my presentation differently because
Mhm.
that's for protection. That's for survival, right? Because there is just a lot fewer people, a lot fewer spaces that are really accepting of my full sort of the desire that I have for presentation and performance in that way. And in some other spaces, like up here in New York, I really just don't think about it like as much or as deeply because I'm so in tune with that internal clock. And the days that I spend going, ugh, and toiling more deeply
Mhm.
and losing myself again to that hunch, that like that closing in and that concentration of all of that energy and that impacting of it downward,
Mhm.
those are my worst days. And the ones that I can free myself and lift my shoulders and go, okay, I know what I'm doing on the outside, but I still know who I am on the inside. And I can still smile in everybody's face either way. Yeah, those are definitely the most freeing.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, David, thank you so much for spending this time with me, for sharing so much of many of your experiences and so much of your wisdom. I wish you the best in all of your endeavors,
Oh my God, thank you so
and
much, Holiday.
safe
This was
travels
honestly
today.
such a little surprise, just a little sweetness for the day, and I really appreciate that. And I can't wait to hear the conversation back. Oh my God, very exciting.
Absolutely. Take good care.